Hey folks, welcome to Running Retro. Today we're going to be doing a disassembly and reassembly of a Super Nintendo. This is my personal Super Nintendo. It's the one that is kind of beat up, because as you'll see on all of these disassembly and reassembly videos, we're just going to be working on my own personal ones, and if I have a choice, then I take the ones that have had a little bit more use and abuse and leave the nice ones for you guys. So here we go, Super Nintendo. This is a one chip, so it will not affect the disassembly and reassembly, but just so you know, we're gonna flip this guy over, and this does require a special bit. These are pretty easy to get. iFixit kits, a lot of them have these. So just, this is a 4.5 millimeter, and you need a 3.8 millimeter for the game cartridges. But one nice thing about the original, about the Super Nintendo, is that you've got nice wide screw holes. We've got these 6, just like on the Nintendo. On the bottom of that, there are 6 holding it together. So you don't have to worry about having a narrower screwdriver like you did on the original Nintendo. It's not that bad. And in fact, in a lot of ways, the Super Nintendo is, well, I've done a lot more than I have done Nintendos, but the Super Nintendo is, to me, a lot easier than the original Nintendo, except for the top. I loathe disassembling the top, and I will show you how, but I will not actually do it, because the power and reset buttons I find like to break when you do that, and the tabs tend to fatigue and break after a bit of time. These might not necessarily come out, so just be aware of that, and then flip it upside down on a surface where you know where they're gonna go, so that they don't go flying off onto the floor. But then when you lift it off, you'll be able to see where they come through a little bit, and just press them through, lift it up, pick up your last couple screws, and there you go. You can see that it's got sort of a strange head. See if I can get my camera to focus on that. It's not doing a very good job on that, but if I hold it down there, a little easier to see. And here we go. Here's the Super Nintendo. So I'll show you the disassembly of the top. So you're gonna have to take out all of these screws. There's one spring here that you'll just slip over and unlatch. You'll press these 2 tabs in to pop this off, and well, this entire plate comes off with the screws, and then you'll pull that out to remove a sliding lock there. Once these are both removed, this will just pop out, and then the cartridge slot will come out when all of these are done, or rather the top plate. And there is a spring. Let's see if I can get the angle. There's a spring down in here that is kind of a pain in the butt. So when you open this up, take all of this off, just be aware of that spring so that you know about it, and be aware of how it's positioned so you can put it back. That is probably my least favorite thing to do on this entire system, is take that top off and that spring. But realistically, if you're going to be working on one of these, you're probably going to be working down here on the board. So don't worry about the top. I might do a later video on full disassembly of the top, but we're going to focus on the main board. You definitely want to power on your system when there's no power attached to it, just to discharge anything. And after I do that, I like to very gently wiggle off the power switch. We'll start next by taking off the cartridge slot. Just lift that up, pull that out, set it aside. Be careful of this spring, and there's your cartridge slot. Take those aside, keep them together, and then you've got the port ribbon cable. The controller port ribbon cable, you can just grab that at the base and very gently slide that out. Now, we're going to take the power switch off. So it's just these two screws. And this comes right off. If you're doing this for the first time, I recommend sort of keeping it in line around the case, and that way you kind of remember where things go. Not all of these are the same. They're the same basically, but some of the boards are a little bit longer, some of the boards are a little bit shorter, and some of the ribbon cables attach from the front and some attach over top. So keep that in mind. Next, we're going to take off this heat shield. And this just pops right off. Note that you cannot get this off without taking the power switch off. Set that aside. We'll take this out of here just so we don't do any damage to the ribbon cable. I hate dealing with ribbon cables. There's my one chip. I'm not sure I've ever actually opened this thing up, to be honest with you. I knew it was a one chip, but it's an 01 obviously. So yeah, here's the board revision. The cartridge slots. Some of them are removable and some of them are not. So you'll note that the cartridge slot is held in by two silver screws that are a little bit longer. Sometimes they're gold, but these two screws are going to be longer, so make sure you pay attention to that. And then up here, we'll move this down a little bit so you can see. There's a screw right here, and there's a screw right here. So we're going to have to get down in here and remove these as well. Now, as you may remember, the magnets on my screwdrivers are not the best. So I'm actually going to grab my longer screwdriver and see if, no. We'll just lift the board off, that's fine. And then flip it upside down and knock those screws out. That's also fine. It's not that big a deal. These are also slightly longer and silver, so make sure you keep track of where those are. There's a standoff here and here. Don't need to take those out. Just remember that they're there. And this one is screwed in. You don't need to do anything with that. So don't worry about it. Just remember that it's there for when, if you flip the case upside down or do something like that. All right. Now let's see. Yes. This is one of those that is soldered to the board. There are two different types of cartridge slot for the Super Nintendo. One that just slides on and one that's soldered to the board. The one that's soldered to the board is almost impossible to replace. I mean, you can desolder it and get another one. But I've had a lot more trouble finding the ones that solder to the board than the ones that slip on. So if you're looking for a replacement on a cartridge slot, you're going to have trouble if you've got one that's soldered to the board. Now for this heat shield, we're going to remove these 4 screws. These screws have a little washer underneath, so they're relatively easy to remember because they're a little bit different than all the others. And once you're done with that, the voltage regulator is screwed to that plate. And it is also easy to tell because it also has washers, but it's also a round-headed screw with round washers, whereas the screws underneath have a have one of those like star-headed washers. So that's how you can tell those apart. Once you've unscrewed that, you can remove this. And now I've left this one screw, and this silver screw, it's sometimes gold as well. This one right here. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes it's silver. I've seen more silver than I've seen gold though. And it is the last screw that holds on this back plate. Now, you can take it out, but the multi-out here in the RF, or the multi-out rather, is still soldered to the board, and your power slot is still soldered to the board. So just because you remove this doesn't mean you're going to be able to take this back plate off. You need to desolder all these connections and the power in order to get this back plate off. I'm not going to remove that screw and I'm not going to remove that back plate, but just so you know what you have to do to take it apart. And that is the disassembly of that board. So to put it back together, I like to put the voltage regulator back on first because it helps to align the heatsink. And then putting these back on. Is relatively easy. Well, I say that, and then actually this, I'm going to free up the screw on the voltage regulator. I screwed that down a little bit too tight, and it bent a little bit, so loosen it up so we can get these in. Whoops. Screw's trying to run away. It doesn't like me. Again, this is a lot easier if the magnet on your screwdriver head is actually a good magnet, which, as I said, mine are not. They're actually really bad. Sort of frustrating. If anyone actually has some really nice magnetic screwdrivers that they recommend, let me know. I'd like to know one. I've gone around and tried to find. I have some old equipment that those things are so good and they've lasted me so long that I'm kind of partial to them, and that's why I've still got them. But if there's anything new out there that is a really good fit for this, let me know. All right. So there's that heat shield back on. We'll tighten this down. Go. Pull the case back up here, slip it in. Got two of the long silver screws here. They're going to go in the back. Again, I would still unscrew it a little bit before you screw it in. And that way you know that you're actually in the thread and you're not stripping something out. Yeah, we're just going to use this. See, this this magnet is way better than... Don't put these screws in after you've had coffee. You'll jigger it all out. So I like to address all of the longer screws first. That way you can't mess it up, and then you don't have to worry about which screws are which. You can't even, you have to swap bits or swap screwdrivers to put the case screws in, so you're not going to mess that up, and you could very easily tighten all these down. And then don't forget to put this heat shield on. So you'll notice that there's a plastic tab here and a plastic tab here for alignment, and it will just slip on like that. Just drops right on, easy peasy. If you have to force it, shy of just like a little pressure, if you have to force it, then you're doing something wrong. Stop what you're doing, make sure that you've got everything the way it should be. Alright, now here too, these two little pins will help you align this, so there you go. That's nice and easy. And there we go. That's back on. You can plug that back in. You can wait till everything else is back together as well, but it doesn't hurt either way. And then here, just get that lined up and very gently, with as much support as you can, slide that back in. All right. Now this part is a royal pain. You want to take this and figure out where this lines up with the hole. So the way, if you're confused about which orientation the spring is, find your spring, line it up, and make sure that it lines up with the hole. Now here, there are two slots right here. Normally, it goes here in this slot. But if you want to get a little more tension, you can actually bend it far enough that it will go in that slot. I personally choose to do that because I like the little extra spring and it doesn't do any damage to the console. So I'll line my pin up, I'll get this in, and then I will slip it. It's kind of hard to see this, but I will actually slip this spring into the hole that I'm trying to get it into, and then I will pull the rod out until it is just barely clearing. Slip it down in here with your thumb and push the rod through until it goes flat. That's how you get this back together. This is probably going to be the thing that's going to give you the most headaches and be the most frustrating. And that's how you do it. Put our top back on. It doesn't want to slide back on. Make sure my spring is in the right place and everything is where it should be, and it is. So, oh, the power switch was not in the right place. Okay, back together. Flip it upside down. Same thing as I did last time. I still like to do where I just drop these in and then swap out for my special bit. These two are easy to get back in, or the easiest, because they're the least recessed and you can get right on them. So I do like to just jump on these and knock them out. So that's a thing right there. And then I'll go down here and deal with these as they're available to do so. When you start feeling some tension and you start feeling a little resistance, you're probably screwed down. You don't want to screw these things in too tight, because remember, it's plastic and it will just strip it out. Get these last two up here. And there you go. There is a disassembly and a reassembly of the Super Nintendo. So if you like that video, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit the bell on your way out. Thanks very much.